Hi, I'm Karen Das. Welcome to my podcast. You can check out my website, karendas.com, for more podcast episodes and links to my YouTube channel, Twitter, Instagram, and radio shows. Foster, by definition, means to encourage the development of something, especially something desirable. Now, my guest reminded me earlier, fostering has been a part of generations for a very long time. Grandparents have done it, aunties have done it, neighbors have done it, and let's not forget teachers to a certain extent. In this episode, we learn about foster care through the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Hello and welcome to Appetite for Discussion TT. My name is Karen Das. Now, I've been working in radio for just over 22 years, and in all of those years, I have had amazing conversations with all sorts of people on a wide range of topics. Appetite for Discussion is a repository for topics we need to explore and discuss more in depth. I do hope you enjoy the following episodes. My guest is Anjuli Tewari De Fague, foster care team lead at the Authority. September in Trinidad and Tobago is known as Foster Care and Adoption Awareness Month. Adoption is not the same as foster care. Foster care, obviously, not the same as adoption. So, Anjuli, you're going to have to come in here and break it down for us. What is the difference between foster care and adoption?
So, foster care is actually the temporary care of children. A lot of people mix it up with adoption, which is the permanent care of children. So, we really want to take the opportunity to clear up the differences. Foster care provides that short-term option, and when I say short-term can span from a night, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a couple of years, because what we're doing is in the background, we're investigating, sort of building capacities within those families, sort of addressing the issues as to why those children were removed in the first place, and seeing how we could boost up those families to potentially return those children to their birth families where appropriate, possible, and in the best interest of their children. So what the foster families do is sort of prepare that child in the meantime, address their needs, give them a safe, loving, warm environment to stay in while we continue to do work in the background.
How long have we had foster care in Trinidad and Tobago?
So actually, foster care started as a pilot project in Trinidad in 1995. It was under the National Family Services, but it was a very small pilot project. So when the Children's Authority became operational in 2015, the full management of the foster care program was handed over to the Children's Authority. So we're the sole organization, agency, that manages foster care in Trinidad and Tobago. So we've actually been now proclaimed for 5 years. So in those 5 years, we've been very fortunate to approve. We started off with a small pool of about 9 foster parents. We've now grown to 47 foster parents, and that spans between Trinidad and Tobago. We actually have 3 approved foster parents in Tobago.
Can you recall how many children were in the system already when the Authority took over?
So when we first started and took over from National Family Services, we may have handed over about 13 children. At present, we have about 64 children in foster care, but that doesn't mean that in the past 5 years it's just been 64 children. We've done many, many placements and removals of children because foster care can be quite fluid. So some children come and they go, they get returned to their families, or they move on to more permanent options like adoption. So it's a very kind of fluid sort of system, and really one of the core elements of the child protection system, because one of the focuses of the Children's Authority is to really support family environment and provide a family environment for children. Whereas the children's homes in Trinidad and Tobago, they've really been our traditional go-to when we remove children from their homes, but we're trying to move away from those institutions, not because they haven't been trying to do the best that they can, but because children thrive better in a family environment.
How does the Authority become aware of a case where a child might be in danger and in need of being in the system?
So part of our system and part of our mandated function is to receive reports from the public. So we actually receive quite a high level of reports on a daily basis. We have a free 24/7 hotline, which is 996 or 800-2014. When persons have concerns about children, we employ them to get in touch with us. We would then do our investigations. We would triage the case to determine is the child in immediate need. Do our teams need to go out straight away? We have 24/7 teams. So we have an investigation team as well as an emergency response team. So if it is at 2 a.m. in the morning, we get a call about a child in danger, our team can go out to verify and substantiate and determine whether that child can be placed with a family member or need to be removed and placed in one of our alternative care homes.
24/7. Now, it must be a bit of a relief knowing that there's assistance available 24/7, but I can't help but wonder about the strain on resources, though.
Like with any other social sector, we do have, challenges with staffing, but I can say, and I've been with the Children's Authority for about 8 years now, I can say that persons in this field are dedicated and passionate about what they do. So the staff that we do have, we do try to sort of take care of them as best as possible, and they do try as best as they can to do what they can with the resources that we have. So it is tough, but child protection isn't one of those businesses that can shut down. It's always going on. Public holidays, Sundays, evenings, late nights, it's always going on in the background. And even foster care. One of the types of foster care we have is actually emergency foster care. So if it is that we do have a child who is abandoned or they found in need of placement at night, I'm able to call and contact some of our special foster carers who are willing to be called at that hour to consider whether they can take that child, at least give them a bed to sleep on at night, or some food in their tummy, so at least the next day we can continue our investigations to continue looking for family members.
Well, you know what? This level of commitment and devotion often goes by without proper and fair recognition. So, on behalf of the many families, the many children who have benefited from the services that you offer and the support that you offer, a huge thank you. In fact, on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago, we thank you for the work that you all do.
I think it's just because, it's assumed that it's just part of the job. Once you sign up to work in child protection, it just comes with the package. But I guess the good thing is, and I'm happy to say that in foster care, we do see a lot of happy endings and good stories. So when we're able to take a child into care, we see that child flourish in the foster home. And we're also able, a lot of the times and sometimes, to see families have that room to maybe make improvements, whether it's get an education, look for a job, fix up the home, just kind of get back on their feet. And then we can start helping them put things in place to get their child back into their care. Sometimes it's not always successful, but we do get to see that child grow up in a safe environment as opposed to languishing. Some of the other teams in the Children's Authority, they do, I guess, see the more horrible side of things, yes. Whereas they're not always happy endings, things get worse. But I'm really lucky that at least I have a really good cadre of foster parents. We've trained them, we've assessed them, we've approved them and made sure that they're legit and safe homes. So at least when we know we remove a child and place them in their care, we know that child will be loved and adequately cared for.
Appetite for Discussion TT is a production of the KDC, the Karen Das Company, KarenDas.com. And as strenuous as it might be in some cases, I'm sure the authority works with other groups. You have other partners in keeping children safe. So who are they?
So if there's a criminal element to it, we do have the Child Protection Unit, the CPU, which we work quite closely with. With regards to all of the healthcare services, when we remove children, we do take them for medicals. So we do have different contacts within different services to sort of determine if that child is injured or requires medical attention. So we do work quite closely with those organizations.
And a call can come in from a medical practitioner as well. So if a doctor or someone in the health service picks up on something that's unusual with a child, do they call you, the Children's Authority, or do they call the police?
I think they actually call both. So we do ask persons, at the end of the day, if there's some sort of crime being committed, we ask persons to make contact with us because we can make a report to the police, but they also under obligation by law to contact the police as well to make that report.
You're listening to Appetite for Discussion TT with me, Karen Das. My guest on this episode, Anjuli Tewari De Fague, Foster Care Team Lead at the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and the topic, foster care. So Anjuli, the big question, who are these children entering the system?
So there are lots of different reasons. In order for a child to hit the foster care system, they need to be under our law designated as a child in need of care and protection. So that means that wherever that child is, it means that their needs aren't being met adequately or they're not safe. So it could be that the child was abandoned, neglected. It could be that they were subject to abuse, whether it's physical, sexual, emotional abuse. It could be that their medical needs aren't being met. Maybe they're a special needs child and they're not being cared for adequately. Or their parents have special needs. So maybe the parent is mentally ill or has developmental needs and can't adequately care for that child. It could go as far as even the child was witness to violence or their parent is incarcerated. But ultimately, it's not safe for them to remain where they are. So in those circumstances, we're able to sort of examine what the Children's Authority do is, though, we do explore family members. The Children's Authority has a bad reputation. Sometimes the media tends to focus on negative things, and it tends to try to imply that the Children's Authority break up families, when in fact we're trying to do the opposite of that. We do try to place children with family members and fit persons where possible, but sometimes, no matter how far we go with our investigations, we can't find persons willing to step up and take on that responsibility, and that's when foster care kicks in.
Okay, so let's take a look at some stats. All right, so we start with age. What's the youngest to enter the system, and what's the longest someone has remained in the system?
So we actually have placed as young as 2 weeks after birth. So we've taken a child straight from the hospital and placed that child with a foster parent. And of course, when a foster parent becomes approved, they are able to determine what type of child they're willing to care for. So foster parents let us know what age they're comfortable caring for, what race, what ethnicity, what religion. Even if it is that they're able to foster more than one child, siblings, or even children with special needs, they let us know this in advance. So at least you get a choice in the type of child who you are able to care for. So like I said, we've placed a child as young as 2 weeks. We've also placed children as old as 17 years old because, as you know, a child is under the age of 18. So we've placed children as old as 17, and once they've reached the age of 18, they age out of care.
What's the longest a child has remained in foster care?
So we actually do have children who end up aging out in foster care, and they've spent a long time. So we've only been operational for 5 years, but prior to us, we've had some children who've stayed in the foster care system. What we're really trying to do in this new child protection system is to start seeking permanent options for children from early on. So as opposed to waiting till it's too late, waiting for years and years to pass, we are actively sort of trying to reintegrate children where possible, or if not, maybe pursue adoption if it's relevant. Or if it is that child has special needs and it's difficult for them to be adopted, we do explore that long-term foster care option with the foster parents once they're willing and able.
And what about those with a delayed mental development, so the special needs persons?
So I know internationally, so there are special allowances for special needs persons, developmentally delayed persons. So whereas the cutoff age in Trinidad is 18, I know in other countries they've extended for special needs persons up to the age of 25. But in Trinidad, at present, we stop at 18. So once that individual, even though they may be much younger, mentally, developmentally, we do sort of hand them on to other services, once they cross the age of 18, because we are no longer able to, by law, seek their best interest in a sense. We do everything we can before they age out, but upon the age of 18, we then hand them over to other services such as National Family Services, etc.
That's important information. Thank you so much. Now, let me just jump back to that 2-week-old. Why would an infant or newborn need to be removed from their parents?
So oftentimes, if it is a parent has a baby, they have the baby at the hospital, medical social workers get involved. And if it is that the medical social workers notice that, there's some concerns around the birth, whether the child didn't attend clinic before the child was born, or it's a known case and the parents may not have the means to look after a baby, no running water, inability to provide food for the baby, or even baby being returned to an unsafe environment. In those instances, we would get a request from the medical social work department or from the hospital asking whether there's any alternative placement for that child. So we try to sort of nip these things in the bud. The worst thing that could happen is if the child is returned to an unsafe environment, and then we have to swoop in after the fact. So the child may have already been subject to, dangers or risks. Because remember, newborn babies, they have a lot of high needs. Yes. And we really want to sort of prevent things from getting worse before they happen. Sometimes as well, some parents come voluntarily and say, look, I have a lot going on right now. I have 5 kids, a new baby on the way. I don't want to give this baby up for adoption just yet, but I'm just not able to. And we are able to, at least if we get that request in advance, we are able to start looking at putting things in place for that child to be received into foster care. And hopefully, within a matter of time, mommy is able to get back on her 2 feet, and able to hopefully take baby back into care. And if not, we explore alternative options.
Well, this brings me to the situation where a child might be having a child. Research showed that there had been a 32% decrease in teenage pregnancies aged 13 to 16, but there was an increase in the number of teenage pregnancies in the age group 17 to 19 between 2014 and 2018. Now, surely the authority would have come across a case or a few cases arising out of teenage pregnancy. How do you all treat with that?
Yeah, I mean, we have had to look for foster care for a baby of a teenage mother. It happened at least 2 occasions before. Obviously, if it's ideal, if we can always keep mommy and child together. So where that's appropriate, there are places, so not foster care so much, there is an organization in Trinidad where we can place mommy and baby so they can both get support from the staff in that organization and their needs be met together. Sometimes it may not be appropriate for mommy and baby to be kept together, so we've had to place baby in foster care in the meantime while mommy gets additional support elsewhere, depending on her needs, whether it's medical, psychological, those kinds of things. So instances like that does happen. It's a population that we're working with, but we're really trying. What we try to do in foster care, and this is something people may not be aware of, we do try to reserve bonds where possible. So the Children's Authority and the foster care unit is responsible for, where appropriate, seeking to establish bonds and visits between children and their birth families. Because no matter what, families still deserve a right to their children and children deserve a right to their family. So we don't want to break those things up. So all in all, we are protecting the identity and location of the foster carer. So at no point is that revealed. We would then pick up the children and bring them to their families, whether it's once a month, twice a month, depending on the court order. So at least bonds are still preserved. A child still knows who their parents are where appropriate. And, we would always sort of be there during those sessions as well to ensure that no inappropriate questions or inappropriate actions take place. So we really are trying to sort of preserve family bonds where appropriate, even with siblings. Sometimes siblings do get separated within the care system, and we try to make sure that those siblings know each other and have bonds with each other, so we do encourage visits between them as well.
Regarding homes, though, have you all ever received an unfavorable response regarding space at children's homes?
Yeah, sometimes they say they don't have space. We have 40 homes in Trinidad and Tobago, and many of them are full. Especially now with COVID, it's difficult to find placement, because we have to think about exposing the children in the homes to new children coming in. So we do rely, we also have a place of safety. We have several places of safety that the Children's Authority have established by law to sort of meet those immediate placement needs, but it really is a short-term option.
Appetite for Discussion TT is a production of the KDC, the Karen Das Company, KarenDas.com. Keeping in mind each case has its own dynamics, on average, how long does this process take?
We do have a stringent process that we have to do because, like I said, we want to make sure we're placing that child in a safe environment. So I would say it can take, average, I would say 4 to 6 months, depending on how cooperative the persons are. And the reason I say that is because there are certain things that individuals have to do. It can't just be saying, I love children, I want to care for children. There's certain things that we need to do. So we encourage persons, give us a call, let's talk with you, chat with you, make sure foster care is for you. We want to make sure that we manage your expectations, you understand what it's about, the reality of it. And then we send you our application form. You fill in the application form, you send in the required documents, which is police certificate of character for all members of the household over the age of 18 and a medical certificate. So we want to make sure the persons, the applicants, are healthy. And then once you do that, we come into your home to do a home assessment. So like I said, we look at your finances, we make sure the home is safe and appropriate for the age of the child you'd like to foster. We also do in-depth interviews with all the members of the household, including grandparents who live in the home, children who live in the home, because we want to make sure everybody's on board, right? So once we do those in-depth interviews, we also do psychological assessments of the foster care applicants, because these tests, they're multiple choice tests, and they determine the potential for abuse as well as the family dynamics. This is our way of sort of making sure that what you're saying to us in the in-depth interview is true. You're not just lying or, sort of trying to hide things and mask things. While that's going on in the background, we're doing background checks with a private sort of investigators within your communities, making sure that, you are an upstanding citizen and everything you say to us is true. We also do reference checks, which you've provided to us, as well as finally, once there's no red flags through that stringent process, we do some basic training. The basic training includes things like child protection, behavior management, child safety, medical needs of the child. We want to make sure that all individuals coming to us, even if they've never cared for a child before, can meet the needs of a child. So we do try to at least prepare you for some of the scenarios that may pop up and provide support to you. Because one thing to flag, once you're approved and a child has been placed in your care, we don't just leave you to fend on your own. We are holding your hand through the entire process, supporting you, monitoring the child, making sure the needs are being met. But we're always there, just at the other end of the phone, face-to-face, making sure that you have the adequate support to do the job properly.
Right. And this goes for everybody in the home, the potential foster home. Because
so if it is that you live with grandparents,
Right.
your parents, they can come to the training as well. I think it's really important that it's a foster family that this child is entering. We really trying to support that whole family in being able to care for the needs of the child. But I want to make sure that, that process, it doesn't scare people off.
Yes.
Because, yes, it has to be detailed. And I think people who've gone through the process appreciate what we're doing. It may not be for everyone. Some persons may say, I can't do that. That's too long. That's too much drama. But once you understand by law, we have to do it in order to be able to place a child confidently in your care, as well as this is our extra way of making sure that when that child leaves a dangerous place and comes into your home, we can rest assured that our foster parents are going to be the right persons to care for them.
Listening to you, I get that the ultimate goal is to have a sound and safe environment for child and eventual reunification with parent and child. Yeah? But what are some of the factors that would work against that intention?
So part of our role isn't just to take children into care. We are working in the background with those families. Whether it's a foster care team or a child and family services team, we are doing work in the background, such as referring them to get grants, to look for a job, seek counseling, to seek mediation where relationships are, sort of damaged. We're doing all those things in the background, getting parents to go to parenting classes, getting parents to get drug counseling, All those things are going on in the background. And obviously, that only works when we have the parents and families buy in. If those parents aren't turning up for all the efforts, we're putting into it, then it's difficult for us to sort of go towards encouraging family reintegration. When we have to do our reports to the court, we have to say, well, we've been helping mommy go to parenting classes she's been attending on a regular basis, versus we set up the parenting classes, mommy never turned up to any.
Yes.
It's difficult for the court to then say, well, mommy, child deserves to come back home to you. It doesn't work like that. The parents really need to put in that effort. A lot of people tend to go to the newspapers and complain about how their child was taken away from them and they don't know why. But if you stop to think, there was a reason why the child was removed and what has been done since. Are you listening to the recommendations? Are you attending classes? Are you attending the counseling? And that's what the court looks at in determining whether that child can be returned to your care.
There's so many positive words popping up in this conversation. Care, love, help, family, support, all great words. And when we describe children, we use positive and bright words. They're resilient, they're brave, they're beautiful kids, they're warm, they're loving, bundles of joy, balls of energy. But for some reason, for some people, when you hear foster kid, you automatically conjure up this in your mind that the child or the children, they're broken, they're damaged, they're coming with a lot of baggage. Now, you're sending out a call for folks to consider becoming foster parents, but this kind of thinking is a huge deterrent. So how should we look at children in the system?
I'm glad you asked that question because a lot of people who come to foster care, they come with this expectation of a perfect child. And I'm amused by that because none of us are perfect, right? So any child who's been through some of the things that these children have been through, it's no wonder that they may act out. It's no wonder that they may have a little attitude or behaviors. Because if we were to really ask my foster parents and persons interested in becoming a foster parent to stop for a second and think, put yourself in the shoes of that child. If you could even imagine what they've seen in their short lifetime, things that we could not even imagine, it really makes you stop for a second and realize their actions and what people would consider as broken. It's not their fault. This was done to them. They've developed coping mechanisms or sort of defense mechanisms to deal with what's been thrown at them. So really and truly, foster care to me is a method to sort of unbreak those children. If it is that we pour unconditional love and just care and sort of attention into these kids, we could really see transformations. And that's how one of my staff actually describes foster care as transforming lives. And I truly agree with that. I've seen some of the children come into foster care and just blossom and change. We've had a child who was actually, I think he was 9 at the time. He lived his entire life, because he was special needs, he lived his entire life in an elderly home. Never had a toy, never surrounded by children his own age, never went to school. He never spoke. But the moment he came into foster care, within a month or two, he started to speak, and we now have seen him grow. He's not in foster care right now, but we were able to get him in an environment where his needs are being met. He was going to a specialist school. We actually had him making sentences, recognizing colors. So we see progress, and we see what a family environment and that one-to-one care can really change a child's life.
What about his parents?
So his parents were, I think, they weren't able to care for him because there was many children in the home. I think as well they were developmentally delayed, so they were unable to sort of meet. That's how come he ended up in the situation he was in. And that's not an uncommon story. It happens a lot in Trinidad. We get requests. I remember one Christmas we actually got a request for 10 siblings in one go. You know, I mean, in Trinidad, we have lots and lots of large families. And whilst obviously we'd like to always keep them together, it's difficult for us to find one place that can take 10 children of different ages at one time. You know, so where we can keep siblings together, we really do try, but sometimes it's not always possible.
You're listening to Appetite for Discussion with me, Karen Das. My guest is Anjuli Tewari De Fague, foster care team lead at the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. In this episode, foster care. Now, Anjuli, we've spent a lot of time talking about foster kids. We have spoken about the placement. I think by now we should have a clear understanding of what foster care is, right? But let's focus on the parent. Who can be a foster parent?
So I always say that in order for you to be a foster parent, you have to have a big heart. It really takes a special individual to become a foster parent. You have to have that empathy. You have to have that unconditional love. And you have to also be prepared to say goodbye if necessary. Sometimes children can stay in your care for many years, depending on the circumstances, but this isn't adoption. If it is that you want adoption, you can feel free to contact the adoption unit, but we ask persons, if it is that adoption is what you want, don't use foster care as a shortcut into adoption. It's two different purposes, two different processes. So really and truly, it's people who have that love and affection and a safe home. Obviously, if we're taking children from a dangerous environment, we want to make sure that they have a safe space to be in. We ask persons to have a supportive network. We have lots of single foster parents who do an excellent job, but we want to make sure that your families, your churches, your communities are open and supportive to what you're doing, because caring for a child is a big task, and support is always important. So it's really, I mean, to me, you can be an older person. We approved a 77-year-old lady not too long ago, and she's very healthy, able to see about the child who's placed in her care. When we ask older individuals, all applicants need to do a medical. So at least we can determine that you're healthy enough to see about the child in your care. We do ask that also financially, although a stipend is provided for the foster child in your care, we want to make sure that financially you are able to meet your own needs. So that stipend shouldn't be used to pay your rent or pay your mortgage or pay for your groceries. Really and truly, when we do our home assessments and checks, we're making sure that you can see after your own needs, so the stipend would not be abused and can be spent purely on the child in your care.
And religious, cultural, ethnic backgrounds.
So we really we want to open this out to all religions, because right now I would say there are some gaps in our foster care cadre. You know, we would like to have foster parents of all different types of religions and races, because obviously when we do match children, we try our best to sort of match them in alignment to what religion they are. But at the end of the day, to me, what trumps all of that is love. So we currently have children of a different religion placed with a foster parent of another religion, but once they're willing to be respectful, of that child's religious beliefs, depending on their age, we're more than happy to do that mix, What warms my heart more than anything, because Trinidad is a multicultural society, and I love that about our culture, because we've seen placements of children of different races in a foster home of a different religion, and it still works so well. One of our foster parents, she actually has 4 children in her care, and they're all different races, and I love that, because to me, you are teaching children that, all races can get along in the same home and love each other like siblings, To me, that's a big part of foster care, that sort of unconditional acceptance and love regardless of race or religion. But in saying that as well, you can specify a race or religion that you prefer for the child in your care, because ultimately it may be easier for your community to accept, or your community to support you, your families, depending on the part of the country you're in. So you do get to also specify those things.
So who are those who will not be eligible to be a foster parent?
So if it is that a person has a home that's not safe, or a home that doesn't have space for a foster child, or if there's one of the criteria for becoming a foster parent is that all adults in the home have to have a police certificate of character. So if it is that one of the persons in your home has a criminal record that endangers a child in your care, if it is that you yourself have a history with the criminal justice system, aggression, jail time, if it is that when you do our medical, it turns out that you are a frequent user of drugs and your health isn't under control. So those kinds of things are the kind of things that we're looking for. We're looking for safe homes for children to be placed in.
And what about those foster parents? When they take in a child, do they get some support as well outside of their training?
Yep. So like I said, the foster parent and the foster child, they are assigned a caseworker. So that caseworker is there to ask advice, to help them, follow up on appointments. Even sometimes the transport for those appointments is difficult for the foster parent to be able to do on their own. We are able to seek referrals for the child, whether it's for additional therapy or any sort of special, like if you were looking for glasses, enrolling them in a school,
yes.
Our caseworkers do help all of the foster parents do that sort of work in the background, but the foster parent really is the one who's responsible for the day-to-day care of the child. So meeting their basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, providing that loving environment, that's what the foster parent does. But we are holding your hand all along the way.
What about same-sex couples?
So right now in Trinidad and Tobago, whilst our law does not permit same-sex marriages, when we do our assessment for foster care, we are looking at the individuals. So if it is that an individual can bring love and affection and a safe home to a child, we are assessing you as an individual. If I'm interviewing somebody about a ton of things, your sexuality and your sexual preference may never come up. Your character in the community, your professionalism, your criminal record, all of those things will come up, but it's your choice. I'm not asking you, are you gay, straight, or,
yes.
I'm not asking you those things. I'm asking you about past relationships, because we go in depth in our interviews. We don't actually specifically ask, in our foster care interview, we don't ask sexuality. We're doing regular and frequent monitoring of that child, their safety, of the individual, of their home. We're always involved. So it's not to say that we're placing the child in harm's way. But when that situation does come to us, then we will treat with it accordingly. But as it stands, a gay couple have not applied to become a foster parent.
Appetite for Discussion TT is a production of the KDC, the Karen Das Company, KarenDas.com. Let's spend a little time on domestic violence. In cases of domestic violence, a parent might find it very difficult to get out or remove themselves from that situation, especially when there's a child or children involved. How does the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago treat with such a case?
Protecting the mother is important to us as well. So we have had situations like that where we seek a shelter, maybe, for the mother, and some shelters are able to take mothers and children, depending on the circumstances. In some situations, it may be that the mother is so traumatized that she's just not able to mentally deal with caring for the children at that point in time. So maybe the mother stays in the shelter, and we find placement for the child. So it really is about, primarily getting that person out, especially if they're in danger, exploring options, whether they can go by a family member or if it means that we have to resort to finding a shelter. So we try to work with those shelters to see what is in the best interest of that situation.
And what happens if you come across an aggressive parent, an uncooperative parent?
In a case like that, when parents are unwilling to cooperate, we would have to enlist the help of the police.
Right.
So we do have sometimes had police accompany us to remove children in those situations. And that's the thing, we really want to, it is very traumatic for kids, we're trying to seek their best interest, and it is a tough decision. We don't just willy-nilly remove children just so. We would do it because we feel as though they were in danger. So that's tough in itself, because obviously we would need to sort of treat with, calming the child down, and, but seeing a parent sort of being belligerent and contentious, that could be really traumatic as well. So, we do ask persons to cooperate with us. If it is that you have done nothing wrong and there's nothing to hide, there was a miscommunication or something, we have the opportunity to address those things, and it's not going to be forever. But in that moment, if we made a decision to remove the child, we do ask persons to cooperate with us as much as possible, for the sake of the child, really. You wouldn't believe a lot of the times in situations like that, once we start engaging with the individual, we start mapping out and exploring potential relatives that they may not have even thought of. And before you know it, we were able to identify a family member who could care for that child. So we never even needed to remove the child in the first place. Sometimes people get so overwhelmed and bogged down by their situation, they don't want to ask for help, that they may block some of those very, very relevant and appropriate options for their child to be placed within the family. Because ultimately we would explore that before just swooping in and removing a child. So we do have that conversation with people. When they say, they're overwhelmed, they really can't do it, we sit down, have a conversation, map out, who do you rely on support on, what family members have a good relationship with the child. Maybe we could give them a call and have a chat with them and find out if they're willing and able to help out for a little while. So those are the things that we help, we also help in that aspect at the authority.
Okay, so this brings me to security and confidentiality. Foster parents taking in a foster kid or foster children from an abusive home where there is violence. What systems are in place to protect the foster family and, of course, the foster child or children?
What we do is, like I said, we never share the details, identity, location of the foster parents with the birth parents or birth families, right? We do try our best as well if there's ever sort of a danger or, say, a birth parent that would cause some problems. We would ensure that we place the child as far away from that location as possible. So say, if it's a case from south, we would try to maybe place that child up north, so sort of just blur those lines with regards to the parent identifying where the child is.
Well, with so many cases popping up and on so many different levels, how do you all at the authority set priority cases?
So I would say we don't have the luxury right now. It's a kind of battle. We have the children in the children's homes who we would like to place in foster care eventually.
Right.
But every time a space opens up in foster care, we are being requested with brand new placements, emergencies from children in their families. So we kind of have to almost weigh up. We have a child who's safe in a children's home, and then we have a child who's been abandoned at the side of the road and danger right now. And unfortunately, we have to kind of go with, priority needs and place the children who are in immediate danger as opposed to maybe looking at some of the children in the children's homes. But I'm hoping eventually, like I said, we've been operational for 5 years now, that once we sort of grow in numbers and we move from 47 to say 100 foster parents, we can actually get to that position where we can explore the children in the children's homes. But we have moved some children from the homes to foster care, but it's not as frequent as we would like to.
Okay, so the Children's Authority places a child in a children's home while waiting for that child to be placed with an appropriate foster parent or parents. But the relationship between the child and the authority doesn't end there. You would have follow-ups.
So once a child is placed in a children's home by the Children's Authority, we do assign them to the Child and Family Services team, so they are able to do follow-up on referrals, on forging those relationships with the families where necessary. So they're not just left on their own. We don't just dump the children in the homes and leave them. We do have a caseworker assigned to them to follow up on their needs. Because the irony is, the home that's overcrowded and has a lot of children is still a safer place than where we probably removed them from.
Right.
People aren't talking about what's going on in the communities. And this is our nation, our communities. The things that are happening to children in our nation, it breaks my heart when you see what's going on in the papers. I've been in child protection for about 15 years now, and still, up to this day, a story can still shock me. You would hear something and you think, wow. And children, bless them, they're so resilient. They've been through that, and they're still a child no matter what. So regardless, our responsibility as a Children's Authority is to care for children, protect them as much as we can, and whether that means, removing them from that space where they were in danger and placing them maybe where they aren't, they're one of many, it's still better an option sometimes for us. Because like I said in the beginning, foster care is really fluid. Sometimes we would get lots of requests for babies. Sometimes we get lots of requests for boys and girls. I would say traditionally, we do have a higher rate of boys in foster care.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that is a reflection of Trinidad on a whole. But I think it would have, if you look at our statistics of the reports we receive on children in need of care and protection, whilst the types of reports are different, it's pretty close. It's half and half. There's as many girls and boys being reported in need of care and protection. We tend to see different crimes. So girls are more subject to sexual abuse, but boys, who are similarly also subject to sexual abuse, they may be more subject to physical aggression and violence. So those are the types of reports that we get for boys and girls. But if you look at statistically, I think it's only like a marginal difference percentage-wise of the entire population of boys and girls difference in Trinidad and Tobago.
And what about the ethnic groups of children in foster care?
So we get all different ethnicities, and even, I was discussing earlier, we get as well as migrant children, we have a large migrant issue in Trinidad, and sometimes that does result in child protection issues, and we have had to place children, and obviously we would need to make sure that families are also welcoming of children of a different nationality. I'm so pleased that we do have foster parents who are willing to care for a child of a different culture, because sometimes those children can be very scared, and it can be very terrifying to not understand the language sometimes. But what's important is that love, a safe space to be in, a bed to sleep in at night, food in their stomachs, So we do get all types of ethnicities.
Anjuli, how do you all measure success?
I think once a child's needs are being met and the child is flourishing, so we've seen children who've come to us, covered in wealth. Not from bruising or anything from physical abuse, but from medical, like a medical issue. And if it is in foster care or in a care situation, all of that medical stuff is cleared up because they're able to seek medical attention, seek medication, regular checkups. To me, that's a success measure. Another success measure is obviously us being able to return children to their families. We do see that as a success measure, but like I said, it has to be where it's appropriate, possible, and in the best interest of the child. We wouldn't want to return a child to that environment just for the sake of ticking a box. Mm-hmm. We'd need to make sure that it's a safe environment. So lots of checks and balances before we actually come to that point.
So how do you all know that, okay, it's time, we have covered everything, and it's time for the child to reunite with their family? And who makes that final decision?
So that would be ultimately court. That has nothing to do with us. We would provide information in support of it. If it is that parents are making all efforts to improve their lives, we work with the parents to get that information to the court. And the parents also get a chance to represent themselves in court. So once a child is placed in foster care, they become a ward of the court. So it's nothing that the foster care team, we don't make those decisions. So a lot of the time the anger of the public kind of gets thrown on the authority, but this really is something that the court determines ultimately. It's also not us who makes that final decision. The board of the Children's Authority makes that final decision. So we compile all of our reports, all of our concerns or things in support of the foster parent being approved, but that board ultimately asks those final questions and makes that final rubber stamp of approval.
We have a saying, prevention is better than cure. It's great that the services being offered by the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago foster care, and in another episode we're going to learn about adoption. But what is the authority doing to help heal society so that we don't have a situation where kids have to be removed from their parents or from their home, where kids can remain in a safe and comfortable environment, which is their home and not a temporary home? What is the authority doing to prevent children from having to enter the system in the first place?
I think it's a real catch-22 because it's almost like we're dealing with fires on a daily basis. But early intervention and prevention is very important to prevent things from escalating and getting worse as years go by. I would say since the authority has started, we really are trying our best to really put ourselves out there and do sensitization on different various topics, such as child protection, what signs to look for in abuse, how to treat with a child who's being abused, who to go to, referral agencies. We've really done a lot of outreach to schools, to parents, to NGOs, to faith-based organizations. Recently, we would have done a lot of outreach because obviously, like you said, September is foster care and adoption month. Putting it out there, really sort of promoting the vision of the Children's Authority, which is to defend and support child rights and to make child protection everybody's business. I feel as though what would be a good sign of success for the Children's Authority is for people to sort of start feeling responsible for the nation's children. It's not just for somebody else to deal with, The more we receive calls, is the more that, for all the calls we receive, there's tons of calls that we don't receive because people just don't see it as their responsibility. So I feel as though the more we get out there and do our public education and outreach sessions, we would raise awareness of the things to be done, things to be noticed, things to avoid doing, Simple things like teaching children good touch and bad touch. Not forcing children to take hugs and kisses from strangers. It doesn't always have to be that you have to force your children to feel and do certain things. It's really a new culture, something as simple and basic as behavior management. Traditionally in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago in particular, it's always about licks, and corporal punishment. But now we're trying to encourage the public to consider alternative behavior management techniques and strategies. And instead of just resorting always to licks, to look at these different techniques in order to avoid different circumstances.
Thank you so much, Anjuli. This really has been a pleasure chatting with you. And many thanks to the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for partnering with me on this podcast series, Appetite for Discussion TT, Foster Care in TNT. Now, how can folks get in touch with the authority if they're interested in foster care or if they are aware of a situation that needs some sort of intervention?
So if it is that somebody's interested in foster care, you can contact 627-0748. That's our main switch line. And then you can ask for foster care team or you can dial extension 40988. You can also send us an email on fostercare@ttchildren.org or you can go to our website, www.ttchildren.org. On that page, you can actually click on the foster care section. You can download our application package. You can check out our frequently asked questions, where we do encourage patients to give us a call, have a chat with us, find out more. If it is that you have a report on a child or concerned about a child, you can call our 24/7 free hotline on 996 or 800-2014. We're getting some feedback, which is great, better than no feedback. So I think it's kind of drip by drip, and I think every format really counts because it's getting it out there. Bottom line, we're planting the seeds, and whether people get back to us now or when they're ready, that's fine. To me, it's just about raising awareness and getting people to just be more aware that it exists.
Understanding Foster Care with Anjuli Tewari De Fague, Foster Care Team Lead at the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. This has been a KDC production, Appetite for Discussion, TT, with Karen Das. Like the content? Check the website, karendas.com. Hit like and subscribe. You'll be notified of brand new content as soon as they're available.